Hello, New York Giants fans. Training camp is turning a corner for the Giants this week as we turn from straight training camp mode into getting ready for preseason games with the Giants facing the Buffalo Bills this coming Saturday. Ed Valentine of Big Blue View here to go through all things Giants this training camp. And here to help me today is Patricia Traina of New York Giants on SI and Locked On Giants. Patty, how are you?
I'm good, Ed. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm looking forward to getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning and driving to New Jersey on Monday morning as we
Oh,
as
you
we tape on Sunday
think
night.
about my drive.
I know. Get the violin. I know.
Yeah.
Whatever. All right. But anyway, Patty, let's talk training camp. Let's talk Giants and week and a half, 2 weeks in at this point. We've finally seen some added practices. We survived some 90 plus degree days out there. Yeah, it was
Barely.
toasty. You know, gotta love Tom Coughlin too. You gotta love Coughlin. You know, Patty, I think the man could still coach.
I agree. I love Tom. I miss him.
Oh, I do too.
No disrespect to Brian and his staff, but I
Yep.
miss Tom.
Yeah. I couldn't help I couldn't help but watch Coughlin speak to the team after practice the other day, watch the video of that, and you could see Dayball in the background, and I couldn't help think to myself, Brian, take some notes. you know?
I was ready to run through a brick wall after watching
uh,
that video. I'll tell you.
yeah, you gotta love Coughlin. Patty, let's talk about camp and let's talk about um what is the one thing that when you look at what we've seen for the first 9, 10 practices, what's the one thing that jumps out to you, as a positive thing?
I think we're seeing growth, not like huge growth, but you're seeing growth at the quarterback position with Jackson Dart. It looks like things are slowing down for him. So that's certainly, I think a positive given how important that position is. So I would start there. I like the competition that we have seen across the board. I think a lot of guys on the defensive side of the ball are a lot more comfortable in this scheme that Shane Bowen runs. I don't think you could say that last year as being the case. And you still see mistakes being made. The pre-snap penalties that's got to get cleaned up. Some guys, are making mistakes that they shouldn't be making. Such as a certain young man who went to your alma mater, Deontay Banks. But you're seeing growth, you're seeing maturity, you're seeing guys who are putting their nose to the grindstone, as it were. And they're taking this. I don't know if, saying taking it seriously is the right word, but they're very locked in and focused. And again, progress is never linear when it comes
Right.
to a football team or any kind of group. But you're seeing little baby steps being taken that give you hope that maybe this coming year is going to be a little bit better than what we saw the last 2 years.
I would agree with that. I think that there is some growth and there is just some it's a better feeling like they know that they're better. And I don't know if that adds up to winning 6 games or 7 games, but I think they know that they're a better football team. Would you agree
Yeah,
with that?
yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of people are going to judge whether they've grown based on wins and losses. That's part of it. What I tend to look at also is, are they more competitive? Are they making fewer mistakes that end up, curtailing their chances of winning? So there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. And I know, ultimately at the end of the day, it's all about the wins and the losses, but you got to take baby steps. If you think about it, this team hit rock bottom last year. There's really nowhere to go but up.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting to see those baby steps being taken. And, I know this is going to sound like a cliche coming from the locker room, but you stack one good day on top of another after another, and pretty soon you're going to have a nice foundation to where maybe now you can build off of that, the more advanced stuff.
Patty, that is a nice locker room GM head
Shows
coach
you how many
cliche.
I've
You
been doing
you
this
you
too
you've
long.
learned you've learned well, Patty. You've
I've
learned
been doing
well.
this too long, Ed. I'm telling you.
Patty, one thing that has stuck out to me is there's more. Would you agree that there's more personality, there's more swag, there's more attitude? Um, just not with everybody on this team, but there are some guys on this team, with that energizer bunny kind of attitude, with that air of confidence about them that I don't think we've seen a lot with the Giants over the last few years. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely would. And I think a big part of that, defensively, year two in the same system, I think guys know a little bit more what they're doing. So there's not as much guessing going on, not as much, second guessing. Did I do the right thing or did I not do the right thing? And then, on the offensive side, and really, this could also, I guess, transfer over to the defensive side as well. But Russell Wilson has really rejuvenated that offense and basically the team with his leadership, the attention for detail. And one thing I've kind of noticed, and I don't know how much of this went on, the last couple of years, but I know I've asked a couple of players about this. I said, are you guys cross communicating with the other side of the ball? In other words, a play is over, you're in the classroom now, and you see, let's say you're a receiver, you see a cornerback do something. Are you going to that cornerback and are you asking him, hey, what did you see me do on this play? What did you do to counter it? There's a lot more communication going on, and that's going to lead to growth. That's going to lead to better preparation and hopefully a better performance on the field when it really counts.
It was interesting you mentioned that. I saw on the field the other day during one of it was the second or third team periods, and Russell Wilson and Brian Burns, who obviously weren't involved at that point, standing in the middle of the field having a conversation. And I have no idea what it was about. It might have been about going out for dinner that night for all I know, but it's the middle of practice, and you can only imagine that they're talking about something that went on during the 11 on 11 period that they were working together. Um, we watched Jackson Dart, and I think we've seen him grow a little bit over the week and a half, and that doesn't mean he's ready to start week one. All right, that let's not go there. But you talk about guys sharing information, and I said this on your show, Patty. Nick Jones, young cornerback, spent 2 years with the Kansas City Chiefs. Jackson Dart, referenced his growing friendship with Nick Jones, a few days ago, and Jones told me over the weekend that they're two lockers away from each other, and he said the two of them talk constantly about what each other is seeing, and Nick Jones has had an interception of Dart in camp. He's broken up a couple passes. He's had a couple of sacks, and they talk about why. They talk about why those things occurred, and it's it has to be invaluable for a quarterback, especially a young learning quarterback, to get input from defensive players about what the defensive players are keying in and what they're seeing from him. So so that kind of stuff, you talk about growth, you talk about maturity, you talk about both sides of the ball helping each other. And that's just an example that I've come across.
Yeah, I mean, we're not in the locker room yet. We won't be until the season starts. But think back to the last couple of years. How often did you see guys congregating except and I'm not talking about playing ping pong or whatever games they were playing, cards or whatever. How many times did you see guys congregating in the locker room going over a playbook or their
Talking ball.
iPad and talking ball? You didn't see that very often. I
No.
have a feeling you're going to see that more this year, and that's something I'm going to be looking for because it's so important. You talk about going out doing your job. You've got to understand what's keeping you from doing your job at the highest level, and what better way to do that than to go across to the guy playing across from you and say, hey, what did you see? How can I be better?
Right, absolutely. And that's what training camp is for. You're all on the same football team and you should be trying to help everybody get better and that's an outstanding sign. Patty, on the flip side, have you seen anything, whether it's an individual player, whether it's a trend, um, whether it's a particular portion of the game, whatever it might be, have you seen anything that you've looked at and just said, "Oh, that's a problem"?
Few things. The pre-snap penalties is a problem. I
Mm-hmm.
know they're working to clean that up. Brian Dable is finally really holding guys' feet to the fire. If you make a mistake, you're coming out. All right. And he's been
Mm-hmm.
doing that in front of the fans that have been in attendance.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody likes to be pulled after making a mistake because everybody's like, oh, that's the guy that made the mistake. Some mistakes you can hide, some you can't.
I
So
saw I saw James Hudson the other day commit a false start penalty on Saturday, and he didn't even wait for Dayball. He committed it and he just left.
he knew.
He
He
knew.
knew. So I
Yeah.
mean
So.
that's something that definitely has to be cleaned up because look, you can't keep hurting yourself. The team, until further notice, this team isn't good enough to overcome some of these mistakes. And there were way too many instances, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I wrote an article about it over on New York Giants on SI, where the pre-snap penalties, stall drives, changed the trajectory of the game, going from like second and short or third and short. Now suddenly you've got second and long and or third and long or whatever. So that's probably number one. I haven't been wild about Deontay Banks's performance, and this is what, year 3 for him now, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is with him, but things he should know he's just not doing on the field. He's not looking for the ball when it's in the air. He's still grabby of
Mm-hmm.
receivers, and he's going to get nailed for that every single time. We saw the other day at practice, he got nailed twice for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting there going, dude, you should know this by now. Now, what gives me hope with him, Paulson Adebo has been working with him.
Mm-hmm.
He's been coaching him up. Maybe he gets through to him and helps him, recognize his talent level. That's what I'm hoping for at any rate. And then I would say the third thing that maybe still has me a little bit, iffy, the defensive line outside of Dexter Lawrence. I don't know that any one guy or two guys has really stepped up and said, hey, here I am. This job is mine. Try and take it from me. You still see, especially, in padded practices, you don't see guys getting off blocks on a regular basis. And I'm just, they've got a collection of guys that they brought in, and I'm just not overwhelmed or ultra impressed with what I've seen so far. Now, maybe that changes over the next few weeks, but I'd like to see somebody step up because Dexter can't do it alone. As good as he is, he cannot do it alone.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Patty. Let's talk a little bit. Um, I'm going to throw a question at you that you and I came up with years ago. That we threw the first time we used this question was long before the Locked On Giants podcast when we were talking to Jonathan Casillas. Is there a player on this roster right now who maybe you didn't know much about, entering the spring or even entering training camp? Is there a player, that's really jumped out at you and you've said, "Oh, that guy could really contribute to this football team"?
That's a good question. I mean, the receivers at the bottom of the depth chart, Bo Collins, um, Dalen Cambry a little bit, Daquan Felton not so much lately. So I would say that I would start there. Um, Defensively, Nick Jones had a good start. Greg Dulcich on the offensive side, the tight end, I think he's a long shot to stick, but he was making plays literally like every day, at least one good play. So you just see an increased level of competition. You see an increased level of a sense of urgency from these players, and that's really a good thing because since when did competition hurt anybody? It's just going to make everybody around you better. And there's been, times, there's been years when I've gone to camp and I thought, I'm underwhelmed by this position group or this position guy that, everybody was so high about. I can't really say, there are a whole lot of guys or position groups other than what I maybe mentioned before that I'm just like, yeah, I'm a little concerned about that.
Well, it's interesting, Patty, because we're still early in August and 53-man rosters aren't going to be set for almost a month yet. It'll be three and a half more weeks. I don't know about you. I am really looking forward to what happens after cutdown day with the Giants because we've watched for years the Giants cut players and the rest of the league goes, you know, whatever. You know, maybe two or three of those guys or a handful of those guys wind up on practice squads. But for the most part, the Giants cut guys and you don't ever hear from them again.
Right.
And I do you agree with me that I think the Giants are going to cut players in a few weeks here. And I think quite a few of those guys that they cut are going to wind up on 53-man rosters somewhere else.
I can see that. Absolutely. I mean, they really added a lot at to beef up the positions, especially the positions last year that were very underwhelming or lacked depth. So I could see that definitely. There's going to be some very difficult decisions for this coaching staff, and I suspect there's going to be guys that they want to sneak through to the practice squad that they're not going to be able to. So I'm curious to see that as well. And I think, by the way, if that happens, I think you and I talked about this on an earlier show. We said that this is probably one of the best rosters that Joe Shane has assembled since he has become GM. And the proof's going to be in the pudding when you see how many guys that get cut land up elsewhere.
Absolutely. Patty, let's turn to the preseason, which, believe it or not, this will be our Monday show here on the Big Blue View YouTube channel. It's a preseason game week, which means that the tone of practice changes. And for all intents and purposes, Monday will be the last practice that fans get to attend. Now, there will be one more, which will be next week. It'll be the Jets Giants joint practice at Quest Diagnostics. But after today, that general sort of training camp atmosphere, training camp vibe with fans there every day goes away. And can you believe that we're here already?
Time flies. Time
Yeah,
flies when you're having fun. And I mean, we'll probably. I don't know. I think in the past we've seen the Giants have like their VIPs and sponsors and whatnot at practices. But you're right. The general crowds will be gone, and it's just it's a different type of vibe when the fans are there, and I'm kind of glad that there hasn't been any rain to wash out some of those practices. I can remember there have been years where practices would get washed out and the fans wouldn't get an opportunity to see. So I'm glad that they finally got a chance to see all the stuff that all of us in the media were talking about and reporting in the spring.
absolutely. Patty, I'm going to ask you about one of your favorite topics. What is the thing that you're looking forward to the most in these preseason games? And that we can talk about players, offense, defense, um, the way that the Giants go about these preseason games, whatever you want.
I want to see, I think, the total operation, and by that I mean from start to finish. How I think Mike Kafka is going to call the plays on offense. That's where it's headed. But how is Brian Dable going to deploy the personnel? Now I have been screaming about get the starters and key reserves game snaps. Don't wait until week 2 and decide, oh, okay, I'm not going to, then I'll play them and then I'll sit them for week 3. You don't have a whole lot of time. And I kind of get the challenge that Brian Dable is facing as every NFL coach is facing. You want to look at the guys at the bottom of the roster because you kind of know what you got with some guys at the, at the top. Like, for example, I wouldn't expect Malik Neighbors to play. I wouldn't
Right.
expect maybe, Brian Burns to play, and certain other guys I wouldn't expect them to play. But you've got to find a balance because this team has 2 games to start the season against NFC East opponents. If they go 0-2 in those games, then it's going to be a long year. And so I would like to see the Giants get Russell Wilson and most of the starting offense, especially that offensive line. Get them out there. Get them some work. Get Tyrone Tracy some work. Get, Devin Singletary some work. Get the tight end some work. Theo Johnson missed half the year last year, or I should say about 5 games. Get him out there. There's no reason to hold a lot of guys back. Dexter Lawrence, we know what he could do. He doesn't need to play. But there has to be a balance. And I just don't think we have seen enough of that the last couple of years.
I would agree, Patty, and I have come to the point with the preseason where I don't know if we talked about this before, but I have kind of developed a theory about the preseason. When there were 4 preseason games, teams used the third preseason game as the dress rehearsal. And then, all the bottom of the roster guys, the guys that were going to get cut, all those guys would play the 4th preseason game. But you only had 8 or 10 days, from that 4th preseason game until the season started, until week 1.
Mm-hmm.
Now what you have when you look at the calendar from the 3rd preseason game to the first game for the Giants is 16 days.
Mm-hmm.
It's 16 days.
Almost.
So my theory has become starters should play a little bit in the first preseason game, a quarter, maybe, as many of those guys as you feel comfortable putting out there. And that the quote unquote dress rehearsal game should be week 3, where they play their longest stretch, more than a half into 3, maybe 3 quarters, because you get a 2.5 week break for guys to get over if they get any bumps and bruises or injuries or whatever. Use that week 2 game as your game to really judge, the bottom of the roster guys, the guys competing for the last couple of spots, or the guys competing for practice squad spots. And that kind of makes sense to me this year because week 2 is when the Giants have their 2 joint practices.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Am I crazy, or does that theory make any sense at all?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I would like to think that's what they're going to do. I mean, get them out there for week 1. Like you said, even if they play just a quarter, get them out there, let them kind of, have some live reps.
Mm-hmm.
Week 2, you've got the joint practices against the Jets. You got 2 joint practices in a controlled environment. So use that weekend's game to see what you got at the bottom of the roster, maybe start making some decisions. Week 3, make that your dress rehearsal, have your starters play, I don't know, a half at least, maybe a little bit into the 3rd quarter, and then let the, guys who you're still not sure about, let them finish out the game.
Mm-hmm.
So I am totally with you on that. I think it's a big mistake to say, oh, okay, we're not going to play our starters at all in week 3. I think that's a huge mistake. You're talking about over 2 weeks of no
Mm-hmm.
football activity, and we have seen slow starts by this team as a result of that philosophy that Dable has had. I'd like to think this year he's going to change that.
Patty, when do we storm Dable's office and demand it?
Whenever you're ready, Ed, I'll be right back.
Yeah, that's that. I don't know, Patty. I think we'd get permanently run out of Quest Diagnostics if we tried that. But maybe we should write Brian a letter. I don't know. Patty, just this upcoming week of practice, anything you're looking for? I mean, practice changes now with the preseason games coming up. You're not going to see as much as much in terms of pads and all of that. Just anything you're looking for on the practice field.
Yeah, just basically continued steps forward. I mean, when they
Mm-hmm.
first started off, you could make the case that practices were sloppy.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to see, one great practice on, say, Monday, and then come Wednesday when they come back to the practice field, they look sloppy again. You want to
Mm-hmm.
see less and less sloppiness. So, progress is never linear, but you want
Mm-hmm.
to see those baby steps continue to go forward to the ultimate goal.
I do find it interesting, Patty, that I've heard two or three times from players, and you talked about Russell Wilson earlier. Two or three times from players, they've said, this practice didn't start very well, and Russ fixed it. You
Mhm.
know, and Russ got us back, you know, to where we needed to be. And that's the we all know that Russell Wilson is not the long-term future, and we all know that Russell Wilson is not the player that he was in 2015 or 2016. But the value of having a guy that's been to so many Pro Bowls, the value of having a guy that's won a Super Bowl, that's won so many games in the NFL, that knows what it's supposed to look like, and that's not afraid to tell guys that they're not meeting the standard. That's just hard to quantify, but it has to help.
Sure. It's an intangible. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, think about it. They've had, I know Daniel Jones tried to be that guy, but, you know, with all due respect to Daniel, I don't know how many guys really truly listened to him because he just didn't have the resume of a Russell Wilson.
Right.
And, again, I think they respected Daniel to an extent, but, you're talking with Russell Wilson, what, 10 Pro Bowls and one Super Bowl?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'd be more inclined to listen to somebody like that as opposed to a guy who's been up and down, up and down. Just me personally, especially if I'm
Absolutely.
an older veteran.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Anyway, Patty, I think that's probably a good place for us to call it a show. I'll see you out there this week. Hopefully, maybe we'll see how it goes. But it's we're getting there. We're getting closer and closer to real football.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're
And
down to what, 35 days now? We're doing a countdown of the best Giants to wear each uniform number that corresponds to the countdown of how many days are left. I think we're up to 35. So
awesome.
we're getting
Cool.
there.
Yeah, cool. So if you guys haven't been checking that out, go ahead and check that out. We did years and years ago. We did a an all-time Giants team, and I one of these days we're gonna update that and see what that was. Probably 2009, 2010 when we did that. It would be interesting to see if the last 15 years have changed that team very much.
Sure.
But yeah, but that's an off-season project, so maybe that's for next off-season. But anyway, Patty, thank you very, very much. Giants fans, please remember, like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.